All right, well, the ghost of Muzeo, also named Katie Adams Farrell, is speaking to you from behind the red box, which is very exciting for everyone, I'm sure. So thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We have a wonderful, this is our first artist talk in a series of new programs that we're launching at Muzeo called Third Thursdays. So thanks for hopping on with us today and for bearing with our super fun technological difficulties. We are really, really excited to have William Camargo for this final program of his exhibition programming, Origins and Displacements. As you know, Museo has volume 2. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it right over to William to introduce our panelists and also to tell us a little bit more about Origins Displacement. So take it away, William.
Cool, awesome. Thanks for everyone that's attending and as well the folks on Facebook Live. So I'm William Camargo. I'm an artist. I'm an advocate. I'm also an educator. And I would call myself more of a community archivist, right? I don't have any professional or institutional training to be an archivist, but I collect archives from neighborhoods from the Latinx diaspora as well. And here we also have Jesus Cortez. I'm going to read you just a quick bio on Jesus Cortez. He is an undocumented immigrant writer who resides in West Anaheim, California, right? He writes from the perspective of a man raised by his single mother. Through his writing, he attempts to bring the stories rarely told about Anaheim and the people in it. And then we have Maritza Geronimo, who is a Nahua Quechua Chicana from Anaheim. There are a doctorate student in the geography department at UCLA. Their research and critical community engagement with indigenous food sovereignty explore the relationship of space, food, and health for indigenous migrants. They organize with the Eagle and the Condor Liberation Front, co-facilitating food sovereignty projects. So I'd like everyone to welcome them here on Muzeo, on the digital space, in the Zoom world, in the Facebook Live world, and in the cloud as well, because I guess this is being recorded. And I'm going to share my screen a little bit just to give you a little bit of background of how my project Origins and Displacements came about. A little bit of my process too. In the other talks I've done, I haven't shown the archive images that I actually that I found through my research, through coming back from living away, and really embracing the history that wasn't really told about Anaheim growing up. You know, I'm not gonna share my age, but I'm a little old. But you know, I want to throw out a shout out to public schools in Anaheim. I went to Horace Mann Elementary, Sycamore Junior High, or Sycamore, what they call it, and then finally the Anaheim High School. I'm also a product of community college, Cal State Fullerton, and as well as a private school, Claremont Graduate University. Let me do this and share my screen. Wait, hold on. There we go. So if folks, panelists, can you see that? Cool. I'm going to be sharing just quickly because I do definitely want to hand over some more time to our guest panelists. You know, this show was started out of my graduate thesis show, which was, you know, I wanted to definitely get in more and learn a little bit more about my hometown. As we know, Anaheim is in Tongva land, and I think definitely we want to acknowledge the keepers of this land before the migration of you know, a lot of Mexicanos and other Latinx folks in Anaheim as well. And so, you know, I title this just kind of like a history placed front and center because it's usually on the side, or it's kind of placed in otherness, in which we see a lot of in institutions who has knowledge, who validates knowledge, and that's what sometimes we're up against a lot of the folks in this panel as well. And while doing research, I definitely Went to this place called the Heritage Center in Anaheim, the Anaheim Heritage Center, which had a quite a bit of amount of archives that I was totally surprised to see. I wasn't really, I knew about the orange groves. I knew about the predominantly Latinx community in Anaheim now, uh, but what came before wasn't really something that I heard about or talked about, or some of the findings that I did find were through the alternative weekly newspaper named OC Weekly, which is sadly now defunct, right? This is where I was grabbing some of the history, and then I further investigated. Um, so this image is Native American workers in Anaheim in the 1920s. Um, Photography was also a new technology, um, and I think as we can tell here, it's an old photograph, and uh, you know, sometimes when people pose for photographs in the 1920s, they literally had to sit there or stand there for more than 10 minutes sometimes. So I was just gravitating to all these archives that I was finding of brown folks in Anaheim. He's another one of the earlier neighborhoods in the Mexican neighborhoods in Anaheim called La Fabrica, which is um, it's still there, right? It's on La Palma and Olive around there, that little area. And there's still some warehouse or some fabricas where a lot of folks migrated to and got jobs there, right? Um, so this is this neighborhood, which still has a rich history that really isn't told. The next one. Not too far from that is also, which is not up there anymore. It's called it was called the La Panma School in Anaheim, in around 1941. This is a class picture, um, and it was purposely made for Mexicanos, right? It was a Mexican school. It was an all brown Mexican school, very much segregated. Um, um, and before making this school, I saw this clip from the Anaheim Bulletin. Once they needed to make the school for Mexicanos, um, and the headline just catch my eyes as well. It says Mexicans must bathe is edict of Anaheim Board of Education, right? So what they thought of Mexicanos in the 20s, it wasn't surprising, and I think we have to really kind of talk about some of these histories because the histories that we're living today, the present, are very much always interconnected. At least for me, and at least for the work that I've done, and just the histories that I've seen play out in the city of Anaheim. Um, so they thought Mexicanos didn't shower. This school had, it says, each will contain bathing facilities, as it is the plan of the school board to compel the 150 Mexican pupils to take baths regularly, the same as American pupils. You're right. So they definitely say, like, what's the standard, right? It's these American kids. I mean, kids today, I think we're kids. I smelled when I was a kid, and the same thing with my like white friend or my Asian friend. We all smelled. We were just so there's just creating these stereotypes already, and I think they definitely affect how a population, especially Black, Indigenous, queer, brown folks are seen today and have these kind of concepts that are usually get passed down. Um, and the some of these images in both the shows at Muzeo and Grand Central are part of the same show, and these are kind of my responses to and my insertion in these spaces that are definitely these kind of negotiations with history, these counter narratives as well. So this is, and I also like to use language that I was using, that I still use, right? There's this form of code switching when, I have a bachelor's and I have a master's degree. Code switching is a kind of survival method that we use in academias. We're not going to cuss. We're not going to use the language in the hood that we used to use. But I think I also want to bring that in and kind of think about language as that as a form of resistance as well. So this is called, it's from the Citrus War in 1936. I didn't want to include like a lot of the archives. I just want to do a little brief kind of introduction of the work and the, where do I get that inspiration from? So this is called Damn Ya Orvalin in 1936. Again, the OC Weekly archives are still up online. You can definitely check out like a bigger article on this, on the Citrus War. Um, and this one doesn't have a date because, what I'm thinking is now, uh, who's being affected by gentrification, right? Who was moved into those, into near the orange groves, who the city built these little neighborhoods purposely to kind of, right, keep uh, people of color, Black folks, separately from the, the white population here. So I think, we're seeing this kind of a circulation of histories, what is being affected by gentrification now, right? Especially somewhere in Anaheim and Santana. It's kind of, this is why history is so important. And I think we shouldn't go just and forget about the history, especially a history that wasn't really told to the youth in Anaheim. And this one's also at Grand Central in Santana. Um, um, and this is another one that we did put up on the Muzeo Instagram, uh, but it kind of convinced me of this connectedness to history because uh, it enabled a lot of contemporary histories that we saw not too long ago, right? In 2016, right? How was this able to occur? And I always see connections with this, and that, and it wasn't a huge surprise to me, right? It wasn't something that I was saying, oh, the city's going to be able to stop this, right? And they're around almost, almost 100 years apart. But if we don't talk about this, then a lot of these things are going to happen again. That's perspective that I have, and that's perspective that we see in history. Right, and coincidentally, this happened near a segregated park, which is called now Precinct Park, and it's a place where I have, I used to play soccer, I used to practice soccer, and we like, with the thing with histories and kind of hidden histories, um, the histories that I did find about this was through some oral histories kept at CSUF through, an Anaheim resident from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and stated that there was a particular area of the park that Mexicanos couldn't hang out, right? I'm not sure which side of the park it was. So, my insertion is I've definitely been to probably the side that wouldn't allow Mexicanos back in the day, to hang out, etc. And the connection with that is it's pretty vivid and uncanny as well. The next one. One thing that too that we forget, I think, is these spaces that the city usually tries to kind of bring in some tourism, right? We know Anaheim is a huge tourist city, and again, it's just kind of this current the continuation of whitewashing, the city landmarks that we have. I don't really go to this place. I think, maybe there's people that go and buy expensive stuff, or I know it's just this connectedness that I have with this space now. And when I did put this image up on Instagram, etc., and currently it's up at Self Help Graphics, I had people tell me that their grandma, that their mother, and their fathers like picked oranges, packed them in this place. And so, these histories kind of start coming in because, um, it feels great to have people connect to it and realize that they're part of this history that, they just never really talked about beforehand. I think that's it. I'm gonna stop there. Um, and now I'm gonna hand the floor to Jesus Cortez, who's gonna be reading and talking about his poetry. One of the main purposes of this thing is I also wanted to give a platform to other folks in Anaheim who've been doing amazing work. And so take it away, Jesus.
Okay, so I'm going to be reading from my chapbook, which was published by Libro Móvil. Um, so uh, just to go off from what William was talking about, right? The whole how the city, how a lot of the history of the city gets whitewashed or hidden or just ignored, right? And we all know why. I mean, we all know it has everything to do with the mouse house. And uh and like growing up, a lot of people like that I would meet, like when I would tell them, oh, I'm from Anaheim, like the assumption is always, oh, Disneyland. And I gotta let them know that it's not like that, especially like for us that grew up on the west part of town. Like we're far from Disneyland. And even until not up until recently, right? Was there a lot of more development, right? Because even growing up, I remember we used to have a lot of empty lots, like, and I'm okay with that. But I guess instead of building affordable housing, they decided to build luxury condos, So you got luxury condos across the street from hotels and motels where poor people live, right? Black, brown, and white, So just a little, personal history, I guess, from where I'm from. Uh, and I guess I'll share too from what schools I went to, which were a lot growing up. But shout out to everyone that went to Maxwell Elementary and Danbrook Elementary, especially because that's where I ended up getting out of sixth grade, and Orangeview and Dale Junior High and Magnolia and so on and so forth. But I got a family that went to Western and Savannah and Brookers, So shout out to everyone. Um, and those schools are mostly out here in West Anaheim, right? So uh, that's 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 where I come from. So I'm gonna start reading about my experiences, and this is more like in the '90s, right? Because I think a lot of us know that in the '90s it was a very violent time everywhere, but in Anaheim it wasn't any different, right? Uh, like I was saying earlier, like in the news, like the news media always tries to like ignore it or cover it up, and a lot of people get the impression that it's all good here, and it wasn't, So I'm gonna read one. It's called 1995 in West Anaheim. Uh, Here it goes. When you grow up in the city, you get used to justified homicide. They said the streets would swallow your soul. A life lived fast is better than waiting to live. Time went by quick when you stepped out into the streets. Your feet moved faster, trying to live another second. You avoided the drugs that killed many brains. Alcohol was your poison. Life was slipping away. Nobody seemed to care. Someone tried to save your soul with the gospel. Others tried to kill it with their school books. Your heart died before manhood bloomed. Nothing mattered. As long as you carry your knife in an empty pocket, you can take their life before they could take your soul. So it's just it's a reality, right? That a lot of young people live. And in 1995, I was 15, so I'm a lot older than even William. Uh, but again, That was my experience, and a lot of other people's experiences even now, right? Like a lot of the youth, their needs are not being met. There's more focus on investing in luxury condos or whatever, near the Platinum Triangle or the Disneyland Resort, but there's not a lot of resources for the youth. Even when they built the community center here in West Anaheim, they built it right next door to a police station, and I don't know how trusting people and families are of police stations, especially after 2012. So, you know, but that's how it is. So I'm gonna read another one. Uh, it's about a donut shop that I used to go to a lot. And before it was a donut shop, it was an arcade right there on Beach and Orange. And that was the first time I ditched it in junior high. That's where I ended up at. But yeah, but now it's a donut shop. And the way things are on Beach Boulevard, I don't. Who knows what it's gonna be next, right? But it's called B&B. It welcomes you as the night crumbles on the city. You walk inside, order coffee, and sit. You admire the sights and take in the smells, decay, loneliness. You become part of those who were swallowed by the unforgiving streets. They walk in with their pretty shoes and their pretty tight clothes and their tired legs and their tired eyes. They walk in with their dirty shoes and their dirty clothes, dragging their souls on the cracked concrete of a city that slowly kills you all. And I read that I wrote that to honor all the people on the streets. Again, people ignored by City Hall. Because when they talk about fixing Beach Boulevard or any part in the city, it's never to benefit. It's never to benefit us, right? Like the people that need it the most. So yeah. So the next one I'm gonna read. It's it's also about people on the streets. Because again, it's that's where I'm from too. So it's called the Queens and Kings. Never listen when they tell you the city ain't yours. You walk between the concrete, selling paradise to the desperate and impure. When you walk the streets with your stilettos, remember you're the queen and you don't need no crown of thorns, queen of all streets. Never listen when they tell you the city ain't yours. When you stand your ground on corners that others fear to cross, your body carries the thorns of yesterday's, your eyes the fire of today. When they walk by you with disdain, show them your blood staining the concrete. Show them your wounds. They have never bled in sacrifice for your city as you have done, street corner king. So this next one I'm gonna share. It's about my favorite park in the city, Tuileries Park. I think anyone in West Anaheim that grew up here knows about Tuileries Park. Uh, and even in that park it has a very interesting history, right? Because I think a lot of us growing up, that's where we ended up at. And I guess because of what the world was and what Anaheim was in the 90s, now it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the parks that's mostly heavily surveyed, so under surveillance. So there's cameras all over the park, giant cameras, and I mean, it's not the park I grew up in, but it's still close to my heart. So um, here it goes. It's Tuileries Park. My knees shook as I approached her near the playground. We looked eye to eye, but the right words never left my heart. She was so pretty, and I felt too broken to speak my true feelings. Love lost before she knew it even existed. The blades of grass, the open arms received my blood sacrifice, the last of what little innocence was left in my 13-year-old body. The blows to my face were the violent city. The alcohol that entered my veins was baptism water. I let the innocent boy die and arose a dead man. Um, so this this next one, I'm gonna read. I've shared it plenty of times, and I dedicated it to the to the people that have died at the hands of the police, um, who still have not received any justice. Uh, it's called Anaheim Monuments, and here it goes. There is a statue near the homeless camps among the bodies of men and women who had become like the grass at La Palma Park, surrounded by a fence to keep the new neighbors from leaving and their dogs from escaping, stands the monument to Bruno the dog, hero to the badges and martyr for the cause of all lives matter. Proud stands Bruno, as proud as the Statue of Liberty and false promises. A few blocks away remain monuments for the martyrs of a city in denial. Sometimes you wish you were a dog so your life could matter. I'm gonna read just one more. This is the last one, and I share this one and I dedicate it to my mom, who passed away 4 years ago, and all the Anaheim mothers, right, who have to raise kids out here and especially through the 90s. So here it goes. It's to an Anaheim mother. You cried for my lost soul, taken by Anaheim streets, Lincoln Avenue, Bella Vista, Pacific Street, and many more apartments where privacy was a luxury that I searched for in alleys and dark nights. We cried together as promises were made, then forgotten as the alcohol reached my 13-year-old belly, and then the handcuffs. You cried and asked why. I cried because the answer was bigger than our pain. This American dream that you wanted to give me, you stayed up late praying for me to remember why you crossed the border, why you tolerated all the scars, why your mind paid the price. We are broken now, you and I. You were more than that scarred body and mind. We were more than mother and son. We were heart and soul, yet tears fill up my eyes, and my feet forget to move. The city will remind me to see you in every street where you dragged your bones, never stopping, always loving me. That's it.
Cool. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah, amazing words. I mean, definitely. We could probably chat about it afterwards and share some stories. Now, I think Katie, if you want to bring up Maritza will be sharing a great project that connected all of us. Uh, so here we go.
Thank you so much, Jesus, too, for that poetry. It's very grounding, especially because I'm away from Anaheim, but all of your poetry just brings me back there. So I appreciate that a lot. And so yeah, I'm really happy to be here with y'all today. Thank you, Will, for inviting me too. Shout out to my Anaheim schools too, I guess. I was raised right there by Loera Elementary, actually. So I went there while junior high, and graduated from Loera High School. So I also worked for a time at Magnolia High School, Catella High School. So I've been at different schools, and it's been really a blessing to work with students from Anaheim, because like y'all mentioned, right, I think we get overlooked a lot, especially K through 12. Police there every day after school, waiting, watching our youth. So it was a honor really to work at the schools and try to challenge some of that. So I'm really grateful to Anaheim. And so this presentation is It's about the Guerrerense diaspora zine that I put together with a couple other friends who I met along the way throughout this process. And essentially, I'll be sharing a little bit of the images of the zine and the inspiration of what came to be this zine. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is Guerrero, very far from Anaheim, but not too far really, because there's so many of us out here in Anaheim, including Will and Jesus, who are both in the zine. And, you know, I wanted to show these maps because I think a lot of people, one, don't know where Guerrero is, and it's in the southern part of Mexico. And so these two maps I chose because for me, Guerrero is really a place of resistance, of rebellion. And this on the one map is showing like the different indigenous groups that we have there, including the Amusco, Mixteco, Nahua, and Tlapaneco. And then this map is not complete. I feel like any map that's coming from the state is very skewed. So, you know, there's indigenous people all over Guerrero, but this one in particular, I think showed just the dominant places where different indigenous pueblos are. And the map on, I'm not sure what side it is for you all, but on my right is this Afro-Mexican map that was made after the first census, where it included Afro-Mexicans. So in the very bottom, you can see like just how yellow and green the regions of Guerrero and also Oaxaca are because of the Costa Chica, which is where a lot of Afro-Mexican, Afro-Indigenous communities are. And so for me, this zine was really a space to highlight those experiences, right, of Indigenous peoples, of Afro-Indigenous people. And so, I mean, I felt like there was stories to be told, connections to be made across the regions, right, of Guerrero. And initially was just gonna focus on Orange County because I had just grown up seeing so many Guerrerenses around me in Anaheim and Santana. And I ended up actually making it broader to include Guerrerenses in diaspora more generally, because there were so many folks from Chicago, from Oxnard, from the Bay who wanted to participate. And so essentially I put out the call for submissions in February of this year, and it took a minute to gather everything. So it was definitely a long process because of the pandemic that kind of emerged in the middle of organizing the zine. And it was my first time putting together something that was with people that I didn't really know. It was just an open call. And I think part of it was also to make those connections with other folks from the diaspora. So yeah, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is just a quick picture of the top is Huitzuco Guerrero, which is where my mom is from. And I mean, I've never been there. I think this is, you know, something I hope to do in my lifetime. But it's a beautiful place in between the mountains. And I know that I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but she migrated here in the early 1990s just due to economic reasons, and landed here in Anaheim, which is a very different geography. I just always like seeing these images because, you know, we come from a lot of lands that are, you know, farm working lands where we get to subsist off our own foods. And that was really important to my family. And you know, that really changed when we came to Anaheim. It was very different over here. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about this, I think, later, but I wanted to just share personally to my roots in Guerrero. And so in August, we finally published digitally the Guerrerense Diaspora Zine, the first volume. And it has, I think, I wrote it down, has 13 contributors with, like I mentioned, folks from LA, Oxnard, Chicago, the Bay Area, Anaheim, Santana, and even Washington. So there was a bunch of interest, I think, originally, and then, you know, a lot of folks ended up submitting. And so right now we're in the process of announcing a second volume, another call for submissions, because there was a lot of folks who wanted to you know, be part of these conversations and be highlighted, because Guerrero gets overlooked a lot. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. But I want to share some of the images now. And we start the zine with a brief history of Guerrero, right? One of my really good friends, Joel Calixto, wrote a brief history of the regions of Guerrero and tried to highlight the fact that we are a lot more than violence. I think Guerrero in the dominant media gets painted as just ongoing narco violence, state violence. And while this is a reality of our peoples, we are so much more than that too. And so part of the zine was showing both the realities that we're facing in Guerrero, and, you know, honoring the fact that we come from this place, while also showing that we are creating just new places belonging in diaspora as well. And, you know, this was my submission for the zine, which was to honor the 43 missing students of Ayotzinapa, who were murdered, some of them were murdered by the state and others are missing until this day. And this is a particularly important cause for me, being in conversation with a lot of the mothers and parents of Ayotzinapa over the years. They have never stopped searching and they're still seeking justice. And it was important, I think, for a lot of folks, even in diaspora. I remember going to a lot of the marches and vigils in Santana when this happened. So it was important, I think, for me to put something in there. And yeah, so this is how we start the zine. And then we have a bunch of different contributions, a lot of poetry, a lot of just stories of people's families and pictures. But another thing that was really important in the zine was the idea of food. And so a really good friend of mine that I made along the way, Angeles from Santana, actually included some of their family recipes from the Costa Chica. So this is a recipe that's in the zine, on chilate, and it's a really important recipe, right, with indigenous and Afro-Indigenous roots. And that was like probably one of the biggest things we wanted to highlight in the zine. And I was really happy that Angeles was willing to share this recipe. So it's in there if y'all wanna, you know, make chilate here. It's a really great and easy recipe. And this is another recipe that my mom and my sister created together. I had asked my mom to submit, and you know, I think one of the ways that she shows a lot of her love and care for us has always been through food. And one of the ways that she's continued to share stories with us. So she wrote here that these are some of the enchiladas that she used to sell in Guerrero with her mom. And so she gives you all the steps. So if you want to make these two, they're in there. But it was a really great way for, I think, my sister to also get involved, who's kind of in this process of also learning more about our family and our roots. And yeah, so it's a really special intergenerational part of the zine. And lastly, I just wanted to share this image that my friend Angeles also made, right? No hay guerrero sin los pueblos negros. There is no guerrero without Black communities. And this was important for us to mention just because of the fact that um, in Mexico, till this day, Indigenous and Black communities um, are at the are the ones facing just ongoing state violence and are often overlooked. And they're, at least Black communities in Guerrero are one of the biggest communities there who have contributed and continue to be present till this day. Even here in Santana, we have one of the biggest populations of Afro-Indigenas. So I was really happy that we got to include this, and in the zine, you'll see a lot more of the just like statistics and the ongoing struggles that Afro-Mexicanos are facing. So yeah, this is just a little bit of the zine. There's, I think, 60 pages of different works. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Please keep following us on Instagram. We have a really big announcement coming up in January. So I'm really excited for what's to come. And yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Maritza. And thank you, Jesus. Yeah, so, we'll chat here a couple minutes. Feel free to add questions on the Q&A and on the Facebook if you're watching from there. Uh, Katie will try to send us those questions. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of throw out there and see, uh, how personally these stories, these migrant stories are for us. Obviously for me, I was born here and I did travel to Guerrero a lot, um, and both my parents are from Guerrero, and our history is also in Guerrero. We're raised, my indigenous histories is also kind of like, I'm still discovering, where my family's from, where those roots are, and so forth on. So, just one question for both of you is how did both of y'all kind of end up here in Anaheim and now making the work?
Want to go for it, Jesus?
Who's the one to answer?
I got my answer is long, so like very long. So oh shit.
Go for it.
Yes, okay. Well, so my mom is the one from Guerrero, right? And she arrived to Puebla when she was like 3 years old, and that's where I was born. But me and my mom, we always joked around that puro Guerrero, So yeah, I was born in Puebla, but then like when I was 9, we came here. Well, my mom left first. She came, and then I traveled here with my sister who was 16 at the time, and my nephew who was a year old, and I was 9, and we took the 3-day bus ride to TJ and magically crossed the border, and yeah, that was it. And I remember we arrived in LA, and I was tripping out because I mean, in Mexico, you don't hear anything. You hear California and you hear LA, right? Because all the movies and all the TV shows. So I remember we were driving off, and I was like, and the buildings kept getting smaller, and I was like, what the, where are we going? I thought we were here, and yeah, it was this trip because then I remember we arrived right there at the corner of Brookers and Lincoln, and if you're from Anaheim, the big old Limbrook the bowling alley, so that was the one of the first things that I saw as a kid, and and that's it. 1989, and yeah, 31 years here. So yeah, so Anaheim for real, you know that's it.
And that was the year I was born, man. You
Yeah,
came
exactly.
right when I was out, bro. Lynbrook is in a. I mean, hopefully it survives, bro, because
Yeah.
that's a spot that um, stay in school, but that when I ditched, I was hitting Lynbrook. It was fun, just bowling and it was a very. I love like these like little spots in Anaheim that all of us have.
Mhm. Yeah.
And Maritza, do you want to go ahead and?
Yeah. So um, I was actually born in LA, in Chinatown, LA. That's where my mom first arrived when she migrated here from Guerrero. And we somehow ended up back in Anaheim, like soon after. So I was raised in Anaheim, and I consider it definitely my home, right? And for most of our upbringing here, most of my mom's pueblo is in Anaheim. Like there was just, I remember growing up and being in community where we would have folks that could migrate back because most of us could not. Um, and they would bring like queso, they will bring like semillitas, they will bring guajes, they will bring everything. And we would just gather at these folks' homes and get to share space and stories. So it was really like for me, even though Anaheim was so big, just knowing that we had all these people that were there that were like familia, it felt really small and special. And we had all these networks of people too, like, growing up with my mom as a single mother, like it was rough in Anaheim, especially like as prices started getting, higher for rent. But we had like always these Guerrero connections with folks working at like Pizza Hut. That's one of my memories that I still have. Like they would bring the Pizza Hut when we didn't have food, and they would just like drop it off, like because there was always extras at the end of the workday. So it's always been just like all those connections and networks that we make for ourselves here. So yeah, it's Anaheim is it for me.
Cool. No, that's funny because every time I mean I always like talk about Pizza because I grew up right near one. That's the one that I used to go instead of later on it was like Little Caesars because it was like $5, But you always need someone at Pizza Hut. The one right there in La Palma, especially for me. But yeah, I think I was born like in a hospital in Santana, uh, but that was just my family was already living in Anaheim by then, um, and not until older, like when I was older, my mother told me these stories of her crossing, um, and actually getting violently dragged by police by border patrol. And it just astounded me how like nonchalant she talked about it because she's like, "Well, I'm just gonna try the next day, whatever." And that kind of resilience of folks migrating here, um, and the stories that my dad like now he's sadly too just we see the like we had like at least 25 like members of our family like live within the same apartment complex or like across the street, and it's been so kind of sad to see like tight knit communities kind of like right go away because of these prices. Now there's only like I think we only have like three other family members that live nearby, um, and when I came back here from being away from living in Chicago, where it's funny because when I did go over there, like I have a couple videos on my phone about like when I was in a room with like 5, 6 other Guerrerenses, and we're just like, whoa, that's crazy, that attachment to that state and their stories were also so like familiar, but also so telling about that state, and the kind of their beginnings and how they migrated as well. Um, I think one last thing I want to hit, there was no questions, is I think for me there's been a lot of events and a lot of things that have happened in Anaheim that kind of have been, um, have changed the way people think about the city. Um, and I think, we shouldn't forget about what happened in 2012. Um, we have all, like, different recollections about it. Uh, I grew, I it's nearby, where the shootings happened. It's nearby Sycamore where I went, and I had a lot of friends going, in Anna Drive, and hanging out there beforehand, and briefly knowing Manuel Diaz, and I think, realizing that, this was something that connected a lot of our communities together, but also, trying to figure out you know what we can do to kind of have a, better, um, a better future for the youth, because I think, that's something that I'm always worried about. I'm an educator, and I teach at the high schools, and I do workshops with the students, and uh, that was always an event that kind of, um, that I still think about over and over again, and what is left there, and how we should not forget, what has happened, and sadly what, still keeps happening. Maybe can some of you maybe recollect about, I was doing an internship in Chicago when I found out about that, and I had friends texting me, and it was chaotic, and it was, uh, but it was something, nothing too surprising for at least the homies that knew this was gonna happen. Like growing up here, as well, police would come around my neighborhood, and ask about my cousins who were older than I was, and mostly in the streets, and um, and then I remember my cousin telling me and my brother and my siblings about, like, hey, yo, like, we got your back, we'll protect you. um, Sometimes it was saddening to be like we don't have a future. They would tell me, the situation has pushed us into this kind of way of life, and they'd be like, you guys are nerds, keep going. Like, just keep studying, like, and I owe a lot to that family, to my cousins who, some of them are still incarcerated, and I think, I'm always thinking about them as a way to kind of still be resistant. But yeah, if you want to kind of just give a little, uh, short, where were you, what happened afterwards?
I guess I can go. Yeah, I remember that day really well, actually. I was, I think, in high school. Um, yeah, I was in high school, and just I remember already, like, before school was even done, people were already talking about like going down there to downtown, and that everyone was gonna go. Um, and it was really interesting because at the time, even though I don't think I fully understood like the way I do now, like of what the police is and the harm they do to our communities, like I just knew like that they were not the people to go to. Like that's just something I knew growing up all the time. Like we had other ways to solve things than call the police, because of things like that, that happen in our communities. But when 2012 happened, and specifically the responses that happened, um, I remember going to downtown, but at the same time, my mom being so scared that anything would happen to me, right? So I wasn't there for long at all, actually. Um, they called it a riot, and I remember that on the news all night, just calling the news people calling it a riot. And now I can reflect on it and be like, that's, it was a rebellion. It's always a rebellion because that's an ongoing thing that's been happening in our communities for way too long. And I think because of Disneyland people forget that that happened way too quickly. And so even though in Anaheim itself, like I felt like that was a really big shift in my life and understanding, like even later when I worked at the high schools, that this was something that students still talked about, that they still were scared about, right? And that nothing really changed after that because, like I mentioned, right, like there were still cop cars after school with these youth who were like, they're doing nothing. They're working like 3 jobs to take care of their family. They're, you know, they're always staying at the after school program so that they don't have to interfere with the police. And so it was just, I think it's still upsetting that not a lot has changed since then. And there's been a lot of organizing, of course, to stop things like gang injunctions. And I remember just like a lot of the organizing that took place after the fact. But yeah, I mean, still to this day, it just a moment that really affected, I think, how I viewed Anaheim and the fact that I knew that people were not going to remember this outside of those who were there, who were affected, and who live in Anaheim, right? Because these tourists come and go, but they don't know like the realities. So yeah, that's what I remember of that day.
Well, so for me, it's although obviously I didn't know them personally, but it started even before Manuel Diaz, right? In March with Martin Hernandez, who was shot and killed too. And but even before that, right? I think growing up and looking the way I do, because I mean I look older now, obviously, but I've always looked like this, right? And it's always been the assumptions that cops have, right? So growing up, my mom always taught me to not trust authority. Even in Mexico, it was always the cops there. The cops everywhere are trash. So it's to not trust authority, to be careful. And every time I left my house, even though I was a badass kid, it was always like, just watch yourself. So growing up, it was an extra layer, I guess, of violence, right? Because the streets are violent, but then the people that are supposed to be protecting you are violent towards you. So there really is nowhere to run, and for the youth that I got to deal with that even to this day. It's sad. When it happened, I was already a grown up, and I remember I was involved in with an organization that dealt with more with immigrant rights than anything else. So I think it was pretty sad that even a lot of organizations they either didn't show up, or they wanted to distance themselves from the situation, right? Because even like local organizations and local politicians, uh, a lot of them, they wanted to calm things down and do things the right way or whatever that is, right? So it was more trying to silence the youngsters and trying to guide them, and the youngsters don't care for that, because first of all, how are they going to trust you if they don't see you around to actually care about them, right? And if the youngsters feel like nobody cares about them, they don't have to listen to anyone, right? So so I was there for most of the nights when it got really ugly. uh on the Tuesday night, I believe, when everybody was in downtown, at one point, we were shot at with pepper balls or whatever it is. I mean, I didn't get hit, so I can't tell you what it was. But for we're just standing there, right? And for yelling at them because. And I remember that night, one of the kids that was there, if I'm not mistaken, he was just riding his bike home, and when we approached him, uh, one of my nephews was there with me. Well, two of my nephews was there with me, and one kid, he was riding his bike and he was bleeding from the head because he had just gotten shot by a projectile. So here we are protesting police brutality, and the police are still acting brutally to the youngsters, right? So when they ask for respect or whatever they ask for, they can't really expect any respect or any type of civility when the minute you rebel, even as peaceful as you can, I mean, they still shoot at you, you know. So my heart still goes out to the families, obviously, and my heart goes out to the kids that have to grow up with that, and because it doesn't seem that like there's any chance for change, at least not on their behalf, obviously, you know. So again, I may not organize anymore for various reasons, but I mean, I'm always willing to do what I can, and if it's through the writing, then at least to acknowledge the history, right, of the city and the resistance, then that's what I'm gonna keep doing. And it's sad, like Maritza was saying, you know, it's sad that a lot of people don't know. And the times when I have brought it up, when I have done readings, and I ask them, like, you know, does anybody know what happened in Anaheim in 2012? And when I see blank faces, it's truly sad. It's either swept under the rug, or it's just people that, you know, they just don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and I think purpose of this kind of panel and just these um, things that I want to continue to do is to still keep that that history living. And um, because again, I think if we forget about it, there's these right there's all these consequences that can happen. um, but I think we at an hour, so definitely keep hopefully another book drops by Jesus, and then look out for um, the volume 2 and the submissions that are gonna come out of that. And I want to thank everyone at Muzeo and Grand Central. I think Jennifer's still on here, Jennifer Frias, who organized the show through the Begovich Gallery at CSUF, my alma mater. Uh, and I think, yeah, I want to thank everyone here, Jesus and Maritza and Katie and um, folks watching. And we want to continue to push this programming and continue to, do community more in community engagement as well. So definitely, keep an eye out on the website and just on, you know, on my personal Instagram and others as well, Museo's Instagram as well. You can still see the show. It is up until the 31st, and I think at Museo it's going to be up a little longer, right?
January 4th. Yeah,
Yeah.
until January 4th.
You have until the 4th to check it out. It's viewable from the outside, right? So I wanted to, especially with COVID as well, but trying to make it more accessible as well to the community. Any last
Yeah,
words?
and I just want to wrap it up really quickly by thanking our panelists, all of whom are inspiring and amazing, the work that you're doing and the art that you're creating. And also to thank everyone for, especially our panelists for being so authentic and courageous. And, Museo is a public museum, right? We are funded in part by the city of Anaheim. And the fact that we are here to open up this programming and to show you that, like, Museo is a nonprofit organization, is a museum that is dedicated to its community. And we are willing to create space to have these conversations because we truly believe in the possibilities of the future. And, we have to start from that authentic place of what the real experience is. And so, sometimes that can be so brutal and really hard. And so, it is new for us to be creating space like this. And so thank you for participating and for your courage and for just being a part of what we're trying to do here at Museo. And of course, William, thank you for always introducing us to the most amazing people in the community. So yeah, I guess with so much gratitude, we will sign off for this evening. And please keep in touch over Instagram as our kind of primary method of engagement right now. I'm working on our website. We'll get there. But please, Instagram is a really good way to keep in touch with us. And we want to hear from our community. We want to hear what you want to see. we want to put your art up on our walls, up in our digital spaces, you know, everywhere we possibly can. So any ideas you have, please know that Muzeo is an open space for you. And thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good night.